Hey guys, what's going on? Shenebris here. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be playing some Bed Wars, and I know I said I was not going to be uploading Bed Wars anymore. However, don't really count this. I'm not really going to count this as part of the series of the Bed Wars series. This is kind of just going to be a separate video where I talk about FPS and FPS clients, and also about the video that I took down yesterday. So you're going to be seeing this, I believe, on Sunday. And on Saturday, I uploaded a video talking about how FPS basically doesn't matter if your FPS is above the refresh rate of your monitor. So let me just explain really quickly what that means. So your refresh rate of your monitor is basically your the number of times per second your monitor can update. Like, so if you, for example, if you have like a 60 hertz monitor, your monitor can basically refresh 60 times a second. If you have a 144 hertz monitor, your monitor can refresh 144 times per second, maximum, right? It doesn't always go that way because like sometimes your computer lags or whatever. It's not always going to be that, but it's like that's the maximum it can basically render to the person using the monitor. And I talked a little bit about how these FPS clients that come out where they're like, oh yeah, you'll get a boost of FPS, how they're kind of stupid. Now, I'm going to stand by that assertion in this video just because it is true that the majority of these FPS clients barely improve your FPS at all. Like, a lot of them say that they improve your FPS, like, by, like, you know, a percentage, or, you know, like, some say, like, oh, plus 1,000 FPS, but that's obviously not true, alright? Nothing can really give you plus 1,000 FPS that isn't, like, spoofing it, obviously. I mean, unless you have a really bad PC and for some reason some certain client just happens to work for you, which is an unlikely scenario, but it is possible. I'm not saying it's completely impossible for that to happen. But the thing is that these FPS clients, the FPS clients I was talking about, they're not completely, like, wrong for, like, trying to get you more FPS, even if you already have the FPS that your hertz rate can sustain. And let me explain why. So, after I uploaded my video, a bunch of people linked me a bunch of videos where they go over why I'm basically wrong, and I admit I'm wrong. I'm not saying that I was, like, completely right there, but I mean, my point is still kind of valid. The point is that, you know, a lot of these clients that are claiming to give you higher FPS, you know, if you already have like 500 FPS, does going to 600 really, like, you know, affect anything? And the answer is not really. I mean, it makes your game a little bit smoother, but I'll get to that in 1 second. So, yeah, so that's pretty much that. Yeah, so that's pretty much that. So, like, my point was still, like, semi-valid, but it wasn't completely valid. So I'm just making this video to kind of correct it, but also I want to talk a little bit more about FPS and why it can help you. So, your monitor's hertz rate is how many times per second your monitor can refresh. So as I went over, that's pretty much that. So then there's also your in-game, not refresh rate, but your FPS, which is like frames per second, which is pretty much how many times per second your game updates to show the next frame. So if you have 400 FPS, then your game is going to be updating 400 times every second to show the next frame. Like, yeah, so that's pretty much that. That's how fast basically it's how fast it will update, right? So the higher FPS you have, the less time there is for your game to update your frames. That kind of sounds weird, but you guys know what I mean, right? There's less time for the game to between individual frames, than there is with lower FPS. Now, the difference is that hertz rate is not necessarily synced with your FPS in game. So, for example, you could have like really high hertz, really high hertz rate, and really low FPS, and like you would still lag. Okay, but that's a bad example. Say you have the opposite. You have really high FPS, but really low hertz rate. You can only see up to that hertz rate, right? So it's not entirely synced. But there is something called input lag, and that's actually something I was missing out on in my video, because essentially what input lag is it's the delay between something rendering in-game and something rendering on your monitor. So, say you have a monitor that can show 60 hertz. Say you have a 60 hertz monitor, right? If you have a 60 hertz monitor and then 60 hertz in-game, that means that the delay between the FPS and your monitor is basically 0. So that's basically called VSync. So VSync just syncs your monitor to your monitor frame rate to your in-game frame rate. So like, for example, if I go on VSync, I'm not going to right now, and this guy has really good stuff. Oh my god, I died. Oh, rip. Okay, yeah, but okay, so say you go on VSync, right? Like, for example, because I have a 165 hertz monitor, if I go on VSync, like, let me go on VSync right now. Like, let me go down to VSync. Let me show you. So now my FPS is basically locked at around 165, which means that my in-game FPS is synced with my monitor hertz rate. Okay, so that's just an example of something you can do. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is, say you have, you know, a 144 hertz monitor and you're getting 200 FPS, right? Now, imagine now this is kind of difficult to visualize without me like really explaining it. But imagine the FPS that you're getting as like divots, kind of. That's the best way I can describe it. Like divots in, you know, I'm gonna put it on the screen. Okay, so there's gonna be lines on the screen, right? You can see there's basically different locations where the game updates, right? And then on top of that, there's also the update rate of your monitor. So because of that, your monitor is not synced with your in-game FPS, unless you're using VSync, obviously. So that means that the delay between your monitor and the in-game, how do I say this? The delay between the in-game rendering and your monitor decreases if you have higher FPS, because it's basically more synced if you have really high FPS. So like, for example, if your FPS increase, then the rate of iterations occurs more frequently, so therefore the delay is less. That's pretty much what I want to say. So yeah, it is true that higher FPS above your you know, monitor rate is going to help you a bunch, but it's not going to help you if you're going from like, okay, so for example, if you're going from like 1000 FPS to 1100 FPS, which I know a lot of these clients, that's kind of like what they do to people's like FPS and stuff, that literally will not help you at all. That's like the most useless thing. That is the most useless thing ever. Like, that there's no point in that whatsoever. There's no point at all. Like, you just don't even bother with that. So that's pretty much the point I was trying to make, but it didn't really come across very well. So there you go. I clarified. Now, another thing that my friend told me, this might not be true, and I think it is true, because I did test this a little bit. And that's the fact that if you have really low FPS, your accuracy actually goes down. Now, let me explain really quickly. That's because when you move, like for example, if I go to 5 FPS, let me show you. If I go to 5 FPS, when you move, it's like really stuttery and stuff, so you can't really accurately aim at exactly where you're looking, right? Now, this is why you also want more stable FPS than high FPS. Like, if you spike a lot, and you go from like 1000 to 100, that's actually a lot worse than staying at 100 constantly. Because you're spiking so much, it's difficult for your in-game... It's difficult for you to in-game determine exactly when to aim because your FPS is spiking so much. So like, if you're aiming at someone and then your FPS like drops randomly, right? And this has happened to everyone, right? If your FPS drops randomly, it's difficult to keep on the target because you're not sure how often your frame rate is going to update, your FPS is going to update. So because of that fact, if you have a more stable FPS, your aim is going to be more accurate because you don't know exactly when your monitor is going to update if you have a lower or spiky FPS, because it will be random, effectively. Not actually random, but like, you know, effectively random. Like, you won't be able to predict it. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say right now. Like, that's pretty much that. So hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.